Welcome, everyone. We're delighted to have participants from various parts of the globe watching this live or later on. Thank you for joining the Spiritism Talk series produced by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I am very excited to host the live talk today by Beatriz Lopes, who will be talking about growing toward the good. Let's all give Bea a very warm welcome, and before she starts her presentation, please allow me to introduce her. Bea Lopes is currently the Director of the Family, Youth, and Children's Spiritist Education, otherwise known as FYCSE, for the United States Spiritist Federation. She is a representative of the U.S. within the International Spiritist Council Youth Committee. Being a Spiritist since childhood, Bea had the remarkable opportunity to present Spiritism globally at the United Nations at the age of 16. Since then, Bea has actively taken on various roles within the Spiritist community, from leading study groups to delivering lectures and organizing events like the annual Spiritist Youth Retreat. Please take this opportunity to send your questions during the presentation using the chat window. Bea has reserved time to address your comments and questions once she concludes her presentation. Bea, it's great to see you again, and it is all yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for being here today, for sharing this moment with me, whether it's right now, whether it's later listening in. Thanks for joining. So today we're going to be talking about this topic, growing towards the good, and how small of kindness can really make a difference. And I know this is a topic that you might be thinking, okay, I've heard that before. I know what you're going to say. I know we talk about charity a lot, and we think we know what that is, and we think we have a good handle on that. But actually, I was really inspired when making this presentation, when making this lecture, and really saw new perspectives that helped me reflect on this topic, on charity, in a new way. And it's always a good reminder for us to have. So I hope that although some of this might be things that we all know, I hope it brings you some new perspectives to reflect on. So to start us off, let's start reflecting with a message from the Spirit Emmanuel brought to us by Chico Xavier. Emmanuel says, observe the generosity of divine blessings everywhere. While man rations the distribution of this or that resource, God does not alter his law of abundance. So how beautiful is this to think about, right? That God's generosity is all around us. God is giving in abundance to all, no matter who that person is. Humans, on the other hand, we ration out, right? There's a limit to how much we're willing to give, whether it's our money, whether it's power, whether it's just our time or opportunities. We limit how much because we have these human concepts of scarcity and limitation. But God doesn't have that. God is giving in abundance to everyone all the time. Emmanuel continues, notice the earth around you, the magnificent sun nurturing life in all directions, the pure, immeasurable air, the spring that gives itself without reservation. Thinking about all these things that we take for granted are gifts that God is giving to us in abundance all the time, right? Our planet and the nature surrounding us is proof of this. We see the sun shining for everyone, no matter who you are. The air that's given to all, no matter where you are. And the water from springs that flow freely without any reservation. I'm sure if we all take a moment right now to reflect, there's so many things we can think of that are given in abundance that we all have access to, because God is not rationing out what he's giving or not discriminating on who is these things are given to. We're all able to smile under a shining sun. And I think that's really powerful to think about. And Emmanuel's showing this too, saying, everything infinitely granted to all, everything generously shared. Oh, everything around us. When you get a moment to sit outside right now, here in the US, we're in summertime. And when you're in summertime, you feel that warmth, that nature. It's great to be outside, to see the trees, the birds, the animals, to see everything. You take a moment to appreciate all that this world gives us. No matter what you're struggling through, you might be having a really bad day, but going outside and that sun shining really makes all the difference. So God is always doing this with nature, right? Is giving everything to all of us. And so Emmanuel continues and reflects that what happens with the Lord's material gifts also occurs in the realm of the Spirit. The doors of wisdom and love are constantly open. So the same way that we are given all this material things, right? Like we may not think of air as material, but it is, right? When we're thinking about the nature, the sun, the air, when we're thinking about these material things that are given to us, Emmanuel's pointing out that we're also being infinitely granted these gifts in the spiritual realm. So think about wisdom, love, creativity, the opportunities for inner growth. All of these things we all have access to. We all can access these things within ourselves, and it's available to all. So no matter where your circumstance is, no matter where you are, what you're struggling through, you're given the opportunity for inner growth. You're given that love inside of you, that creativity, that mind, that thinking, right? It's all given to us as gifts from God as well. And it's important to remember that no matter what situation we find ourselves in, we all have access to our spiritual guidance. No matter where we are, we can stop and say, please help me in this moment. And our spiritual mentors will be there with us. So again, this does not discriminate, and it's not a certain amount that runs out that we can't all have. Everyone can have this if we're all looking for it and seeking, which Emmanuel goes to talk about a little. He says that while we have these countless blessings around us with the material sense, with nature, and also in the spiritual sense, however, from the river of life's blessings, each soul only withdraws the portion of riches it can perceive and use effectively. So we have all of this around us, and that's wonderful. But how much are we actually taking and using? How much are we taking advantage of? A lot of the times we step outside in the sun and we don't think about it, or we breathe in air and we don't think that that's a gift that we have. So each person, all of these things are around us, and the spiritual guidance, that love, our creativity, it's with us all the time. But how much are we actually perceiving, and how much are we using effectively? So you can think about in our everyday lives, right? How many times does someone give you really good advice, or you hear a message that really inspires you, but then you don't really take that into consideration, or you disregard it, you move it to the side, oh, that was nice, and then the next day you forget it. We're constantly doing that with the gifts that God's giving us. We are, even if we realize for a moment, we brush it off, the next thing comes up. So it's important for us to reflect on, what are we making good use of? What might we not be realizing is around us that we could be taking use of, that we could be grateful for, that we could notice more our surroundings? And what are we doing for our own personal growth towards the good? We all have that opportunity. No matter where we are, who we are, what we're doing, we have the opportunity to work on our inner selves, to have that spiritual guidance, to have the support from the beautiful nature all around us. But what are we doing? What are we acknowledging and taking advantage of these resources to use them effectively to really transform ourselves towards the good? And so to help us reflect on these questions, I've brought a story about a woman named Regina. And so this is a true story told in the book Diversity of Charisms by Hermínio Miranda. And this is about a woman in Brazil. And this was a true story, but her name, Regina, is just used in the story to keep the story anonymous to who she is. So it is a true story, but the name Regina is just a placeholder for us. So Regina was a good person, and she was still getting the sense that there's something more she could do. You know, she was active in her community, she would help people, she was friendly, but she felt like there's something more that I can do. I have this desire that I can do more. And so one day she's thinking, reflecting on this of I can do more, and she has a very vivid dream. And this dream really changed the direction of her life. So in this dream, Regina woke up in the dream, and it was nighttime, and there was a fine cold rain that was falling. So it was drizzling, it was cold, and this rain, and she was in the middle of the street. She didn't understand why. And suddenly, she starts to hear the cry of a baby. And this cry feels so desperate, and she's so drawn to this cry of the baby that she goes looking for it. She goes looking for the baby, and eventually, following this path of cries until it gets louder and louder, she finds a baby, fully naked, shivering, freezing cold, in the backyard of a house. She sees that baby and is overwhelmed by compassion, by the need to help. So she bundles that little baby up, holds it close to her body to start warming up the baby, and realizes, I need to do something to help this child. She goes into the nearest house, and again, let's remember that this is a dream, so it wasn't necessarily her house, but in this dream, she saw the nearest house and brought this baby inside and said, okay, we need to shower this baby, we need to feed this baby, we need to clothe this baby. And so she starts doing all that. She gets a bath for the baby, warms the baby, and slowly the cries start to soften, and the baby starts to find comfort, go to sleep, and relax. And so she's there taking care of this baby and saying, what can I do? I need to help this child. What am I going to do with this child? And her first thought as well is saying, I need to clothe this child. I need to find some clothes. So in that moment, Regina wakes up from this dream, this very vivid dream, and she is left with this feeling of, I need to do something. It felt so real to her in that moment, that desire to help, that she needed to do something for this child. She didn't know who this child was, where this child was, but she knew she needed to take action. And Regina, she was not married herself, and she didn't have any children. So this was an interesting scenario for her, because there were no children immediately in her life, but she felt this desire of, I need to help that child. I need to find that child. And so for some time, she starts looking for this child everywhere. She is looking in alleyways and in orphanage. She's looking for this child everywhere. And especially on the nights when it's cold, fine rain, again, she can't even sleep because she's thinking that this child is out there somewhere and I need to find him. I need to help him. And this goes on for a while, a long time. And she even begins to start telling her friends, her neighbors about this dream and telling them to keep an eye out. If you hear of a child in need of help, like, that is my calling. But a year passes by and no baby appears. She never finds this child in the alleyway or in the cold that needed help. So at this point, she's getting rather confused about what did that dream meant, because it really felt so vivid. It felt like a calling. And so Regina was with her friend who was pregnant at the time, and her friend was working on making a layette. And a layette, as pictured here, is something that people would make, usually for themselves, but sometimes it would be given to other people, that it was all the essentials a baby needed for their first few months of life. And this was really to prepare the baby for everything they needed, but also to give the parents all the resources that they would need to get that baby, to get their feeding, their grounding while this baby was coming into their lives. So it not only had clothes, but it had clothes of different sizes while the baby growed. It had diapers, it had blankets, all these things you can imagine. And this, you can think of it in this little photo you see here. Everything that you needed to get started with having a baby. And so her friend was working on making her own layette, and Regina suddenly said, what if I start making layettes for babies in need? She thought about that night, that dream of that night with the baby that needed clothes, and she realized, you know what, this is something I could do. I could start making layettes for babies and for needy families that don't have the means to make their own layette, that don't have the means to buy their own things. I can start making these and donating them. And so with that, she invited her friend to join her in this project. And while her friend was already making her own layette, she felt inspired and compassionate as well to help in this project. So very quickly, Regina got to work, and she started working on these layettes, making these little clothing items, making these little blankets with all the love and care, with good quality materials, taking her time and doing her best. And during that week when she started the project, she felt this fine cold rain. It was raining all week long, but this time, instead of keeping her awake at night, instead of keeping her worried, she felt a peace in her heart. And it was in this moment that she realized that this is what she was meant to do. Not to find one specific baby that needed help, but to help several, to help these poor families that didn't have anything else, to help them get the support and love that they need to get started with this child. And so thus began the work. And the idea was to provide everything the baby would need so that the parents had time to get back on their feet. But as she started doing this, of course, very quickly, many suggestions started coming up. And one of the suggestions she got most often is, why don't you sell these beautiful layettes that you're making? Why don't you sell them to wealthy people and then get that money to be able to buy in bulk, and you can make even more layettes and distribute it out to many more people? And while this is a sentiment that I think a lot of us might have, Regina saw things from a different point of view. She said that most people believe that anything is good enough for the poor. That, okay, let's buy in bulk, let's get it to a lot of families in need, let's expand. And, it's taking her so much time to make one layette, which she is carefully crafting one by one. She's putting over 50 beautiful pieces in each basket. And they're saying, why? You're not going to be able to reach that many people. Let's get it in bulk and we can make a lot more. But Regina kind of explained to people that that's not what is important in this situation. The poor mother, she said, they can't afford to have poor quality clothing. Because for a wealthy woman, a wealthy mother, they have the ability to, if that item rips, if it gets worn out really quickly, they can replace it. But for a poor mother, that's the only one she's going to have. That's the only blanket she's going to have. And it's going to need to last a long time. So Regina really put things into perspective for people that actually the poor mother needs the better quality because they're going to use that one item over and over again. Whereas a wealthy mother, they could keep replacing if something broke or if something ripped or tore or they outgrew it. She also pointed out that no matter who the mother is, who the family is, millionaires, middle class, poor, struggling families, they all wish the best for their child. They all wish all that love and kindness and compassion towards their child. So why is that only the wealthy people should have these beautiful layettes? The poor mother, if she could, would want to give to her child the same exact thing, the same high quality goods. And so Regina really pointed out that It wasn't just about distributing in mass quantities, but the difference that the quality can make of these layettes. So in short, these layettes were truly well crafted, as if they were for her own child. They were made of good quality material, and each one was sewn with love and kindness. And it's interesting to reflect on, because how many of us would think about the same thing? I definitely thought that as well, of how can we make the most of these? Okay, let's help as many as possible. How can we distribute this in mass quantities? And I think that makes sense, because when we think about charity, we think of this definition. We think of charity as help, especially in the form of money, given freely to people who are in need. So it makes sense that we think in that way, that we think, let's get more quantity out there, that let's buy in bulk, be able to distribute to more and more people, because we're trained to have this mindset that charity is giving things, especially in the form of money. But what can we give? So if the more you're giving, the better it is. So it makes sense that we have this thought, and that people were going to Regina with this thought. They didn't mean poorly. They meant well, but we're trained that charity is this form of just giving physical things, and that we need to give more and more physical things. That's better. But as Regina was showing these people, is that really what charity is about? And so Kardec was having these same questions and on this word charity. And he asked the spirits in question 886 of the Spirits book, he said, what is the true meaning of the word charity as Jesus understood it? And the spirits answered, charity is benevolence towards everyone, indulgence towards the imperfection of others, and forgiveness for offenses. So look at the difference in these definitions of charity. The true definition of charity, when we're thinking about our role model, Jesus, it doesn't mention giving money or giving physical things, but talking about genuine kindness and care for others. And that is where we see this importance of the quality over quantity, the love that she's putting into these baskets over just mass producing them in big quantities to deliver out. And Kardec also reflected on this, and he included a comment that says, love and charity supplement the law of justice, because loving our neighbor is to do them all the good possible, all that we would wish to be done to ourselves. Such is the meaning of Jesus' words, love one another as brothers. Do them all the good possible. That is such an easy thing to say, but a really hard thing to do. And so again, we're seeing here that it's not just about giving things, right? Doing all the good possible. We don't just always want physical things. Sometimes we need love. Sometimes we need a shoulder to cry on, someone to listen to us. There's so much more, right, that goes into doing all the good possible than just giving physical things. And Kardec continues his reflection, and he says, charity, according to Jesus, is not restricted to almsgiving, but embraces all our relations with our fellow humans, whether in situations below, equal, or superior to our own. Those who are truly charitable seek to uplift the self-esteem of those in lower positions, thereby diminishing the distance between both. I think this comment is really important because, of course, it's not restricted to almsgiving or to giving material things. So we need to give material things, and it's still nice and it's still charitable to give those material things. And of course, that's a necessity. But what they're saying here is that it's not restricted to that. That's not the only way that you can help people. There's so much more that you can do to help. And you can do that by seeking to uplift the self-esteem of those in lower positions. So how can we uplift those who are struggling? How can we make them feel loved, cared for, make them feel human again? And that can be real charity as well. So while it is nice and it's important to give physical things, which is what Regina did, it also has another piece to it. There's another component, another way we can help, even if we have nothing physical to give ourselves. There is this component that we can just help lift one another up, make each other feel as best as possible, do them all the good possible, right? As I previously mentioned. And so this is exactly what Regina knew and she implemented in her work. Regina recognized that it's better to light a single candle than curse the darkness. We can't help everyone as much as we want to. It's impossible for us right now to help everyone in the world. But if we can just help one person, truly help that one person, that can make all the difference. And so that's exactly what Regina focused on. And she notes here, and I love this note, that they would have been fine with anything because extreme poverty leaves no room to refuse. But it's true that a better layette leads to create remarkable situations. And that's what we're about to see with a few stories I've brought here of the impact that these layettes had on the families that Regina gave these to. And that, of course, if we did it in bulk, if we gave something that wasn't as high quality, they would accept that and they would have that because they don't have any room to refuse, right? If they're really poor and they're really struggling, they don't have anything, so they're not going to refuse. But the difference that the layette makes when it's made with love and kindness and really shows people that they're cared for makes remarkable change in the world. And so the first story I'll bring here, returning to Regina and her layettes, is the story of a woman who, this was a woman who had 8 children already, and she was pregnant with her 9th. Her husband was unemployed, and because he couldn't find a job, he was feeling a lot of pressure for the hardships that their family was facing. And through his frustration, he began to spend their meager earnings, the little that they had, he began to spend that on drinking. And as he drank more and more, he began to mistreat his wife and children and really started creating this terrible environment within this home that was already struggling. When Regina found out about this woman and prepared a layette for her, the woman went to go pick it up. And she explained that this situation is because of all the hardships that they faced, and she knows that he can do better, but is so overwhelmed with how much their family is struggling. When Regina showed her the package with the layette, she was shocked. She was speechless. She couldn't hold back her emotions, and she began to cry uncontrollably. She was so overwhelmed that she left without even thanking anyone. But the following week, she returned to apologize and to express her gratitude to Regina. She had never dreamed of something so beautiful for one of her children, and she was truly happy. When her husband came home and she had come home with this layette, and she was showing her husband each of these beautiful pieces one by one, he was astonished. And he became very suspicious very quickly and said, "Who gave this to you?" When the wife explained the story that it was a woman who was making layettes for those in need, the husband said, "Impossible. How could you have gotten this? A gift from who? Who would do that for us?" And then he says, "Does this mean that kindness really exists?" And with that, he broke down crying. And he made an unexpected change that he vowed that he would never drink again, that he would be there to support his family. And he kept that vow. So here, this layette rekindled the flame of hope and dispelled the shadows that had enveloped a poor, discouraged household. This layette that seemed like such a simple gift had the power to change this household entirely. Of course, they're still going to have struggles. Of course, there's still hardship, but now they have hope that they can do it, that they can overcome this. The second story here of another layette, and which, by the way, there's over hundreds of stories of these layettes and the impacts that they've had. This layette began with the cleaning woman that worked at Regina's home once a week. The cleaning woman spoke about a woman that she heard in the slums who was pregnant, and they had no money, no clothes. The husband was ill and he was unemployed, and they really didn't have anything. They didn't even have electricity, and the woman was working as a laundress to try and make money for their family to have anything. She was already 8 months pregnant, but she was still working so hard to keep making money. But she was so just in despair that she would cry every day. She felt so unmotivated and hopeless. Regina offered to send a layette to this woman, and she said, "No, I can go pick it up." So when she comes to pick up the layette from Regina, Regina invites her in and says, "Oh, I'm going to pack it up for you." And as Regina is showing her all the pieces one by one, the lady is shocked, speechless. Again, a common theme here, that overwhelmed with so much emotion. She couldn't believe that all that was for her. And she was so overwhelmed that she didn't even let Regina pack it. She quickly started packing up the stuff as if it was going to disappear, as if Regina was going to change her mind. And so a few days later, the cleaning woman came to apologize and said, "I'm so sorry she left without saying thank you." She was so overwhelmed with gratitude, with joy, that she was speechless. But the cleaning woman tells Regina, "But you wouldn't believe what happens." When she got back to her neighborhood, she looked like a crazy woman. She was running around with all of these items in a basket bundled on her head, and she was going door to door showing everyone all the beautiful items that she received for her newborn child. She was happy and she was singing, and she was inspired to take on more work because she was motivated that I want us to have electricity. I want us to get our home in a better shape for when this baby comes. So gone were the tears of tension and uncertainty. Now she sang. Now she was inspired. And she said that these little pieces of clothing seemed like a magical talisman that she never grew tired of looking at or caressing as if they were alive. So these weren't just pieces of clothing. These weren't just little items that are going to be used a few times. These changed people's lives. This was the hope that they needed, the inspiration. They felt like a magic talisman that she kept looking at these clothes as if they held magic themselves. The third story here is the layette that moved the grandfather. So Regina heard about an urgent case that came in, that a young woman went to the hospital that was feeling ill and ended up being in labor. The aunt was calling Regina to ask if there was any clothes that she could give, because the hospital did not allow the baby to leave until it had clothing. And the aunt was in despair. She was talking to Regina about how the father, who is the baby's grandfather, was very old-fashioned and strict in his ways. And when he heard about this, he was disappointed and he was ashamed. And he declared that he would not let his daughter back in his house or the baby back in his house because she was dishonored from the family. The aunt was in despair because what did she do with this young new mother and her baby? There was an older sister, but the older sister also struggled. She lived in a small one-room house with 4 children and her husband. How could she possibly take in her sister and the baby? The aunt was in despair of how she has no means of making a living, no means of caring for this baby. How is she going to do it? And Regina calmly answered that not only did she have a few shirts for the baby, she had an entire layette ready. because she had extras for cases just like this. And so Regina's aunt, or the aunt, stopped by Regina's home to pick up the Laylet and again was talking about the struggles. Regina encouraged the woman, why don't you try and talk to the grandfather one more time? Why don't you try to convince him to let the daughter back in their home? The woman, still very distressed, took Regina's recommendation into consideration, and she got home, and she did present the Laylet and talk to the grandfather. A few days later, when Regina heard back from the woman, Regina asked how that conversation went. And the lady was fascinated. She said, I didn't even have to do much. The Laylet did all of the work. Regina said, how so? How did it do the work? The woman explained that the grandfather was so surprised. His initial reaction, he didn't care for it. He didn't want to look at it. He was so ashamed again of the situation that he didn't even want to look. But slowly the aunt revealed pieces one by one. And as he started to see that, he broke his hard shell that he had. And suddenly he began to cry and cry and cry. Once he calmed down, he made the decision. And he said, since God is helping us so much, I can't leave my daughter on the streets. Bring her and the baby home. And here, now, the baby returned to the home, and hope bloomed in this family. The grandfather that gave the daughter a chance, that forgave this daughter, that let her back in, the aunt and the sister feeling hope and inspired that the daughter will be cared for. Of course, everything wasn't fully resolved, but this ignited the spark that their family needed. A Laylet made with love helped resolve many things. Would a cheaply, poorly made Laylet have triggered this transformative process? So this Laylet, it calmed the young mother, it opened the heart of the grandfather, it brought peace to the sister and the aunt who weren't sure what to do with the situation, and overall left the family feeling blessed and happy. But imagine if this was a poorly made Laylet of just things thrown together from things that were bought in bulk. Of course, they would have accepted it because they needed it, but would have had the power to change this entire family in the way that it did. And lastly, the last story I'll bring to you about a Laylet is the story of a woman who lived on a farm. So Regina was brought this story of a woman who lived in the interior city, who lived in a farm. And this woman was pregnant with her 10th child. Her husband was sick and unemployed and unable to find work. They barely had enough to keep their entire family from starving. Her health was very fragile, and she was working on the streets to do anything she could to provide for her family. And so Regina's neighbor heard about this story, and Regina's neighbor asked, oh, can I bring a few yards of the flannel, a few yards of just the material to this woman in need, because I'm going to that area to visit. And Regina said, why take only a little bit of the material? Bring an entire layette. So when the woman arrived and provided this layette to the mother, the pregnant mother, then the mother was shocked. She said, where did this come from? I can't believe this. And once again, as a similar reaction, she was visibly overwhelmed with emotions. She was crying, she was laughing, she was tears were uncontrollably coming down her face. And she was so amazed and couldn't believe that this was for her child, let alone her 10th child. She didn't even know how she could do anything. Not only did this inspire this woman, but the neighbor saw this and felt inspired to help as well, and helped the husband get a job that now he could work and make some income, so the woman no longer had to work and cleaning the streets. and instead was able to take care of not only the baby to come, but also all the other children she had. The nun at the hospital was also inspired to advocate for this woman, to not only help her through her pregnancy, but to help her with some of her underlying health conditions. When she returned home with the new baby, she felt a renewed sense of hope and light for the future. And what's incredible about this story is that when the woman was back home, she insisted to the Regina's friend that brought the materials and the layette. She insisted to bring back these materials because give it the fabric to someone who needs it more than she did. After all, she had just received a complete layette. There were surely people who needed that fabric more. In her extreme poverty, she gave the most valuable gift. While some give from their surplus, she gave almost all she had. This woman who didn't have anything, she recognized that, wow, now I have so much. I can give this because there's surely people who have less than I do. Coming from a place where she already didn't have much. In this extreme poverty, she gave the most valuable gift. She gave almost all she had. And that is true charity. It's much bigger than just giving. It's the power to rekindle the flame of life, of hope, of kindness in our hearts. So as we leave here today, I would just want us to remember what Emmanuel tells us: to study, observe, work, and renew yourself towards the good. Expand your vision and assist others while helping yourself. Remember that God gives his gift without measure, and we should remember to do the same. Thank you all so much for being here today. And again, I hope this enlightened you with a new perspective of charity and inspired you to do one small act of kindness today. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bea, so much for your thoughtful reflections. Please stay with us for the Q&A session that will start shortly after some announcements. First, the 19th Century Spiritist Symposium, the USSF annual national event to happen on September 20th, 2025 in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Save the date and join us to reflect on the evolution of consciousness, a path towards enlightenment. There will be activities for kids and teens all day. To register, please visit spiritistsymposium.org. Second, the podcast-like series, Psychology and Spirituality, A Bridge to a Better Life, based on the works by Joanna de Angelis. A new episode every Friday at 7 p.m., available on YouTube and Spotify. Third, there's a new book release, The Spiritist Review 1865 by Allan Kardec. It is available at spiritistbooks.us. And there is the Spiritist app, Be My Hope. This app offers uplifting content in a collection of videos, daily messages, and audio materials. Download it now from the App Store or Google Play. It is free. And finally, now available are 7 free professionally recorded Spiritist audiobooks, sponsored and produced by the Spiritist Society of the Carolinas. At your own pace, listen to Allan Kardec's foundational works on YouTube and at Spiritist Society Carolinas or the USSF YouTube channel. And finally, on the screen, please note there is a QR code. If you want to help the United States Spiritist Federation promote Spiritism to everyone, please Scan the QR code on the screen for your donation. Now, let's turn our attention to your comments and questions. There is still time to submit yours. Alrighty, so Bea, we have a question from the United States Spiritist Federation. Can you elaborate on some of the roadblocks we create from within that prevent us from growing towards the good?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that is the biggest roadblock is saying we'll do it later. Saying, I don't have time to do that right now, but when I have more time, when I have more money, when I have this or that, I'll be able to do this. I'll be able to do good. I'll be able to help. And we get in this cycle that we're always pushing it off. We're always waiting for, oh, I need these things. No, let's start right now, right? No matter what it is, maybe we don't have that much time to give, so there's something else we could do. Maybe we have a lot of time to give but not a lot of money, so how can we do that? Like, what can you do in the situations you're currently in your life? Because if you keep pushing it off for later never comes. So what can we do right now, I think, is one of the biggest roadblocks we face.
It is amazing how much procrastination does creep into our daily lives, isn't it?
Totally, yeah. Before you know it, so much time has passed.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Okay, next question. From the U.S. Spiritist Federation, people talk about allowing God into our hearts. How do we do this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's a individual journey for everyone. But one thing that I would say is just embracing the goodness that's around us is when we are outside in nature and we open our hearts to that and feel the like immense beauty in that and the importance that each of us has for being in this moment, for being here. Like, that's one thing that really helps me reflect is stopping our busy lives, being in the moment for 1 second and noticing all the good that's around us. And when we have a moment of despair on the opposite side, how can we stop for a moment and just say, please help, right? I know that there is this help. And just having that moment, always, I find it to be really calming and really recenters me.
Very good point. Okay. Next question. From the International Spiritist Council. How can we assess whether we are genuinely progressing towards goodness and moral growth rather than simply feeling good about it?
Yeah, that's a really important aspect that I think comes up a lot for people. There's a lot of people who do good, and probably all of us included, right? We do good, but we're expecting a pat on the back. We're expecting an acknowledgement. And that's okay because we are imperfect spirits. We're trying our best. So baby steps, right? If at first we're doing good because we're waiting for someone to acknowledge it, I still think that's a good step in the right direction. Still better than not doing any good at all. But what we want to strive for is really doing that goodness just out of the kindness of our hearts. No one else is seeing it. Like in this case with Regina, even the story puts a different name so that she's not, because it's not about her bragging about this work that she did, right? It's just genuinely doing this good for other people. So I think it's a step in the right direction when we do good regardless. But the next step to improving that is not worrying about what people are going to think or who's going to see it or if this is going to get the most likes or comments, but just doing the good, and the impact will definitely be there.
Yeah, it may not be easy, but if we can get to a point where we do something positive for others and then we just forget about it and go on to something else.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Next question. What are the benefits of practicing the good?
Great. Yeah. There's so much. I always think when I'm helping someone, or, in this case of Regina, there's a lot that you get out of it as well. When you're helping someone else, you learn or you take skills, or I find that the more that I do, the more that I'm able to do. So when I take some time to help someone out, I feel like motivated of like, oh, I can do these other things. I feel inspired to keep going. So I think it comes back around to us in the sense that we also learn from those experiences. We also grow as people in those experiences.
So it's more the active Jesus, when Jesus says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Next question from the International Spiritist Council. Can you talk about your work with youth, both on the USSF and the ISC, International Spiritist Council?
Yes. Thank you so much for this question. Yeah, so I am currently working as the director of the FYCSE organization of the United States Spiritist Federation. And I also work on the youth council for the International Spiritist Council. And I want to say that while I work in these organizations, these are all of these amazing events and things we put together are run by teams of incredible volunteers who dedicate their time towards the good, growing towards the good, dedicate their time to making all of these events possible. So while it's never one person, it's always a big team. But for the United States Federation, we have some great events. One of the things we're working on is a lesson plan project. And what we're doing is trying to connect lesson plans for Spiritist education that many centers, they already have, and they're creating such wonderful ideas. How do we create a network that we can share those, that someone that's starting off or someone that might be stuck and needs an idea, how can we share those resources that we're all creating so well? And so we're constantly adding to that project and looking for volunteers to donate lesson plans or also help us edit lesson plans. And we also have wonderful events where we're trying to bring youth, young adults together in Spiritism, specifically in English. Here in the US, it's not as common that youth grow up and they're not usually surrounded by other Spiritists. So how can we unite this youth? One of the incredible events we have is the annual Spiritist Youth Retreat. That is a wonderful event where people, teens and young adults from all around the United States and even some other countries now come together in this moment and not only learn about Spiritism, but feel connected, feel like they belong because for once they're surrounded by other Spiritist teens. And just with the International Spiritist Council, I can't miss the opportunity to talk about our study group that we have once a month that connects Spiritist youth from around the world. We're doing this currently in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and soon we'll be adding Italian to that as well. And it's a moment that we all connect in all of the languages all together, and then we split into breakout rooms for each group to study the same material, but just in their preferred language. And it's really inspiring time. It is happening tomorrow. So if you're interested, definitely check out the International Spiritist Council website, and you'll be able to find the information to sign up. And lastly, but not least, I just want to point out the World Congress that's happening this year in Uruguay that also is going to be having a youth portion as well of the event. So the World Conference, we can think of it as a conference that adults will be attending, but there is a very well fledged out youth component to this event as well. I hear that there's already over 100 youth, teens, young adults signed up to attend. And so this is going to be a really empowering moment to gather youth, Spiritist youth from around the world. So we're really looking forward to that in October. So definitely lots going on there.
Absolutely. All of this work is extremely important. And I've heard a few Spiritists talk about how their activities as youth had a profound impact on their lives later on.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay. That'll be it for our questions. And thank you, Bea, for your and a heartfelt thanks for everyone who joined us for today's live talk. And to those who regularly follow our weekly Spiritism Talk series, your continued engagement is truly appreciated. We invite you to join us next Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for our upcoming live session where Marcelo Neto will explore the topic, Jesus, yesterday, today, and always. We look forward to your participation. Bea, before we close this live, could you end it for us with your final remarks and with a final prayer?
Yes, of course. Just thank you again so much for being here, and hopefully we all leave here and try and do at least one small act of kindness today. And so with that, we're raising our thoughts, our minds, our hearts to Jesus, to God, to our mentor spirits, thanking for everything we're so wonderfully given all around us all the time that we might take for granted. Thank you for always supporting us, being there and guiding us, even when we might not notice it. Allow this moment to inspire us to do good, to do a small act of kindness, to start changing the world one little step at a time. Thank you for continuing to enlighten us and being with us each and every day, connecting us and helping us grow towards the good. And so be it.